This forecast is brought to you by me. For information on readings I'm offering and to purchase your own reading, check out my website, manic.mercurian.net. And don't forget to email me your birth, date, time, and location for a reading as well. My email is manic.mercurian@gmail.com. All of my information is in the description, and if I remember, I will comment it as well. Thank you. Welcome to your astrological forecast for the week of Monday, July 15th through Sunday, July 21st, 2024. This week is kind of an interesting week. We still don't have any super mega major events that are, dramatically changing our lives as far as I can tell. However, we do definitely have a lot of interesting things happening this week to talk about. Definitely some interesting developments. Those of you that are well seasoned in astrology know that because we are approaching the 21st, that means we are approaching the beginning of a new sign. We're not quite there yet, but we are sort of wrapping up Cancer season now. I talked in the last week's forecast about how Mercury and Venus are already in Leo. So in many ways, we're already kind of experiencing kind of a glimpse of Leo's season. For most of us, we live in the Northern Hemisphere for the most part. So this means we are definitely well into, summer at this point, getting all those summer vibes, that really happy-go-lucky, warm kind of party energy. That's summer, and specifically that's kind of Leo energy. So that's what we're moving into. The sun will not quite enter Leo yet this week. That's going to happen on the first day of next week's forecast. But as we approach the end of Cancer season, actually on the very last day of Cancer on this Sunday, we will have a full moon at the last degree of Capricorn being opposed by the sun at the last degree of Cancer. So that's going to be really interesting to talk about. And we have I'm excited for this forecast because we have a few other things that are, again, not necessarily super major, but they are very interesting to talk about. So let's get into it. So starting out with Monday, July 15th, this is one of those things I was talking about where there are two aspects today. Neither one of them are large enough that I would typically talk about them. But because of the nature of their energies and because both are happening, simultaneously within the same day, I thought it would be worth mentioning because I think this is going to be a weird day. I think it's something to look out for. So what aspects am I talking about? Again, there's two of them. One is Sun squaring Chiron. So we can see Sun at 23 degrees Cancer near the top of the chart, and it's making a waxing square to Chiron at 23 degrees Aries. I always mention how aspects with Chiron are awkward. Yes, Chiron is the wounded healer, and it can support empathy and healing and all this stuff that sounds really good on paper, right? It's very psychological, very therapeutic. But if you actually think about what that means, therapy is awkward and difficult, growth and even empathy and, psychology. All of these things are very difficult, okay, and sometimes awkward. So that's kind of the energy that aspects to Chiron bring up, especially in transits like this. And especially because this is a square, okay, and this is a very emotional square. Chiron is, again, it's at 23 degrees Aries. So, ever since Chiron entered Aries in 2018, we've been triggered. We've been very sensitive. Our wounds are at the forefront, and we're very individualistic with expressing our wounds and things of that nature. So now all that is being brought up by this square from the sun, which is at 23 degrees Cancer. Sun in Cancer is, of course, very emotional as well. Sun is channeling in the energy of emotion. Cancer is the sign of emotion. And really, in a weird way, these energies have a lot in common. Chiron and Aries, Sun and Cancer, both show that we're very aware of our own feelings, our own wounds, our own traumas, our own truth, so to speak. However, Cancer and Aries square each other. In this case, Sun and Chiron square each other. So although, from an abstract astrological level, they do have some things in common, I guess the difference is Chiron in Aries. Aries is a much more masculine energy. Cancer is very feminine. Aries is fire. Cancer is water. So although they do have some commonalities, these energies are tense together. They're combating one another. They're forming this direct connection, this direct kind of conversation, but it's a tense conversation. It's kind of like an argument, I guess you could say. And as if that weren't enough, we've got a secondary aspect. I don't know if secondary is technically the right word. We have a second aspect happening today at the same time, and that's Mars conjoining Uranus. This might actually be a bigger one. even, more impactful than Sun squaring Chiron. Mars conjoining Uranus, this is one that many astrologers, many people that I know that are into astrology have been looking out for, because let's break it down. So for one, Mars and Uranus are the two most volatile planets in the solar system. Uranus is the god of earthquakes, the energy of earthquakes and sudden awakenings. It's known for being very unpredictable. And Mars is the warrior god. It's the god of war. Mars triggers things. Mars pushes us to take action. What's interesting about this conjunction is that neither Mars nor Uranus are particularly strong. They're both out of place. They're both, at 26 degrees Taurus today. And Mars is in a detriment in Taurus, and Uranus is in fall in Taurus. So you have both of these very volatile planets, which are both kind of exiled. It's like they're both meeting. They're both in this faraway land where they don't know the customs. They're awkward. They're out of place. But they're both meeting and they're both unifying. They're having this coupling. They're on the same page, so to speak. They're aligning with each other and strengthening each other. Yet both of them are. It's kind of like, what's that saying? Misery loves company. It's like they're both kind of miserable or exiled. They're both out of place, but they're both unified in that position, if that makes sense. So basically, the way I'm looking at it is, although I guess you could say these aspects are kind of involved with one another. Sun is sextiling the Mars-Uranus conjunction, and then Sun is also squaring Chiron. So you just have these weird aspects. Both are very contentious. Both look very intense to me. I think both of these aspects could trigger people. Like things could really hit the fan, so to speak. Things could hit a boiling point. I don't think these are, and I have to be careful of what I say, because I know, we live in such strange and wild times. So really anything could happen. But generally speaking, I wouldn't say these would be so large that I would expect a large event in the world. However, I'm not entirely sure, though. The Mars-Uranus conjunction in particular looks volatile. Keep in mind, though, this happens once every year or two. So it's not the first time that Mars and Uranus have been conjunct in Taurus. Uranus entered Taurus in 2018. Just like Chiron entered Aries in 2018, Uranus entered Taurus in 2018 as well. So it's not the first time that this has happened. I've heard rumors of, could this trigger war? There's multiple areas of the world that are very tense right now. Anything could happen. It's hard to say. But again, this type of dynamic, Mars conjunct Uranus in Taurus, has happened before. And I did look back and I didn't see any wars starting around those dates. So it's hard to say. But if I had to bet on it, I would say this does look like a wild day. It looks very intense. It wouldn't surprise me if there were fights or public outrage or, different events going on. Maybe even rebellions, protests. That wouldn't surprise me, but I don't think it would be much more large scale than that. I could always be wrong, but that's as far as I can see. That's what my guess is. Okay. And let's flip forward a few more days here. So we can see Tuesday. Isn't this cool? I kind of lined it up in a way that I don't usually do. So there's Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. You can see how everything is kind of gradually changing. I don't know. Maybe I'm weird. I just thought that was fun. Anyway, I'm going to skip through most of the week. And really what I want to talk about now, other than Monday, are, we covered Monday. So let's talk about Saturday and Sunday at the end of the scope of this forecast. So for Saturday, July 20th, Mars will enter Gemini. But remember, just like I've been saying in the last couple of forecasts, any time that a planet leaves one sign and enters another, in that process, first it will aspect Neptune and then it will aspect Pluto, if that makes sense. I know that might be complicated. That might sound confusing. So basically, it's really not complicated. Neptune's at the last degree of Pisces. It just went retrograde recently. And Pluto's at the first degree of Aquarius. So that's why I feel like I might be losing some people on this. Whenever a planet enters a sign, because Pluto and Neptune are both very close to their respective cusps, that means that anytime any planet enters a sign, it aspects both of those. I don't know. That's the best I can explain it. So anyway, another way to explain it is on Saturday. Let me turn my phone off. I'm sorry. Oh gosh, I'm so sorry. I'm trying to do better about keeping my notifications on. I usually just have them off all the time. I'm trying to juggle these jobs. Anyway, Saturday, July 20th. So, okay, Mars is preparing to, well, not just preparing to leave a sign. Let's put it this way. So right here, right, this chart specifically, noon Eastern Standard Time, Saturday, July 20th. This is where you can see Mars is at the end of Taurus. Oh, my pointer's working. It doesn't always work. So Mars is at the end of Taurus right here, and as Mars is at 29 degrees Taurus, it makes a waxing sextile to Neptune at 29 degrees Pisces. Okay, it's actually really like dead on exact at noon Eastern Standard Time. So this is a funky one. Mars Neptune aspects are really weird. And keep in mind, it was just a few days ago that Mars was conjoining Uranus. Now Mars is sextiling Neptune. And it basically makes this sextile as it's on its way out of Taurus into Gemini. Okay. Gosh, and this is a challenge for me, I'm going to be honest, because again, Mars is the energy of war. It's like our fighting energy. It's our ambition, our drive, our individuality, how we assert ourselves. And Mars making a sextile is a very harmonious aspect. It's making a sextile to Neptune. It's just that Neptune is a very different type of energy. Neptune is all about spirituality, especially at the end of Pisces. It's very, I think the main difference is Mars is all about division, dividing things. It's about separation. Like I'm me, I'm going to do what's best for me. I don't care about what you're doing. If you think about it, warfare is all about defense or offense. You're either using a weapon to like cut something, divide something, or you're using a shield, which is also dividing you, if that makes sense. But now Mars is making this, pleasant, this harmonious conversation with Neptune, which is kind of the opposite. Neptune's all about dissolving the barriers, kind of melting into everything. It's more saying that, we're all part of the same energy, kumbaya, whatever the saying is. I forgot what it is, but you know what I'm talking about. So this is weird. It's a weird one. I think this could be a really great day for like channeling intuition into our drive or ambition. So like, whatever our goals are, that is aligning with the greater kind of spiritual energy. Or, we may see this kind of connection to how does my individuality and my personal goals line up with the cosmos, the bigger picture, with humanity. There is a connection there. If you follow what's truly best for you and yourself and your greater upliftment, oftentimes we find that just so happens to connect with something that's helping humanity. Does that make sense? Like, many of you are spiritual or artistic. The more you develop those kinds of abilities, the more that you'll find that you have exactly what it takes to help other people, if that makes sense. So I think that's what this aspect is about. It's equally about individuality just as much as it's about, the cosmos and humanity and etc. That's about as good as an analysis you're going to get from me, because it's a funky one. It's a weird one. On the flip side, Mars sextile Neptune. Mars-Neptune aspects can be confusing. We can sometimes have so much like ambition and drive and confidence, even though we're in the fog, like we're not seeing clearly. We might have kind of grandiose expectations today too. So both Mars and Neptune are kind of double-edged swords, I would say. Mars is a malefic, so it tends to be more of a troublemaker, and Neptune, technically it's not a malefic, but I view Neptune as the hardest planet personally. So I could see how this could be very inspiring and uplifting, and we can really use this, to be artistic or to come up with goals and dreams and inspiration. But on the other hand, I could see how this could be also kind of confusing, and maybe just double check what you're thinking. It's great to have that inspiration, that connection to soul and all that, and to have that raw passion and energy. But maybe just like, I don't know, filter it, process it as well, because it may not be entirely grounded. That's my only critique. This is a sextile, so it's mostly positive, but Mars and Neptune, they're weird energies. Like, sometimes I like to personify the planets. Mars is a kind of a dick. Mars would be like a jock who's kind of, really aggressive and like full of testosterone. And Neptune is like this hippie, like I almost picture Neptune as like a drug dealer. Okay. So imagine these two characters, which again are very different. They normally wouldn't hang out together, but they're having this conversation and getting along great. Just imagine where would that go? Like, yeah, maybe that could be really cool and they could come up with some like cool plan together. Or maybe it's just a bunch of nonsense and chaos that they're going to create. You know what I mean? Like, that's the energy that we're talking about here. I think that gives you a really good kind of idea of the energy at hand. Okay, and within the day on Saturday, July 20th, Mars will leave Taurus and enter Gemini. So this is kind of positive depending on how you look at it. You know, Mars and Taurus, like I said, was in detriment, right? It's debilitated. Like, I don't think Mars and Taurus is the worst energy, but sometimes we can be a little bit complacent with Mars in Taurus, right? Also, you know, Mars was so close to Uranus. There were a lot of like, I didn't mention this earlier. I probably should have. But there's a lot of potential for like earth changes and earth events, like weather events, or literally earthquakes with Mars and Uranus in Taurus, especially Mars conjunct Uranus back on Monday the 15th. So now that I think that's kind of lessening, that's less intense as Mars enters Gemini. Mars and Gemini is kind of a weird energy. We're going to experience that for the next several weeks. What to say about that? I mean, Gemini is a very intellectual sign. It doesn't really take anything too seriously, and again, Mars is our drive and our ambition and things like that. So with Mars and Gemini, you know, moving forward, that shows that what we're desiring as a collective is more intellectual in nature. You know, we might not be taking things so seriously. We might want to just play around and have fun and try different things, be very experimental, kind of like a little kid in a way. What else? We might value information. So we might be fighting for information or fighting with information, if that makes sense. It's more of an intellectual battle. That's why, again, Mars is it's kind of a weird energy in Gemini. All right, let's move forward one day ahead here. So Sunday, July 21st, we're going to talk about this a lot. I have a lot to say about this day. It's going to be very interesting. We do have the full moon at 29 degrees Capricorn, and it's conjunct Pluto. But before I talk about that, let's continue to talk about Mars, because basically this is going to be good. You're going to want to hear this. So other than the full moon, we have a whole laundry list of aspects happening today, and I wanted to go through them because I think it would be fun and interesting, and I think you should know this. So basically, let me preface this by saying Sun, Mercury, Venus, Mars, these are the fastest moving planets, quote unquote, quote unquote planets in astrology. We call the sun and moon planets in astrology, even though technically they're not. Whatever you want to call them, like heavenly bodies, I think sounds too technical and kind of weird. So let's just call them all planets. Other than the moon, which I don't talk about lunar aspects a lot because the moon is so fast that we have like multiple lunar aspects each and every day. It would just take too much time. They're such short-term phenomena that they're not really worth going into a whole lot, generally speaking. So other than the moon, Sun, Mercury, Venus, Mars, these are the fastest moving bodies. They make the most aspects in astrology. Okay, so it's not uncommon to have one or more aspects from one or more of these key players. What's interesting on Sunday though is that all four of these planets make their own aspect. Sun, Mercury, Venus, Mars, each of these makes an aspect today. Okay, so first let's talk about Mars. We just mentioned, you should, if you pay attention, you should already know what I'm about to say. Mars just entered Gemini. Mars is now at 0 degrees Gemini. And as Mars transits through 0 degrees Gemini, it makes a trine. It's a waxing trine. I know I keep saying all these aspects are waxing, but they kind of are, which is sort of interesting. I think it's because we had so many conjunctions just a few months ago. So now all the planets are separating. They're moving away from each other. They're waxing. Anyway, so Mars is trining Pluto. This one's a little bit more straightforward. And really, if you think about it, Mars has been pretty busy this week. First, it was conjoining Uranus. Then it was sextiling Neptune. Now it's trining Pluto. This is really interesting. So, Mars, again, the drive, the ambition, the individuality. Typically, Mars is in the inner solar system, so it has more to do with our individual personalities, our individual experience, and our short-term events. But Mars is having all these conversations this week, making all these aspects to these really far outer planets, Uranus, Neptune, Pluto. So outer planets have a much different energy. They're very, alien, ethereal, otherworldly, abstract, and they're much more long-term in nature, much more big picture. So that's where it's really interesting. If you just take a step back and look at it as a whole, we're channeling in these like otherworldly and like kind of spiritual and ethereal energies into our individuality, into our defense, our offense, into our ambition, our goals, etc. So I think after this week, if you are open, if you are adapting and you're open to the changes that are happening and the energies that are here this week, by the time we get to the end of the week, pay attention to what your goals are at the beginning of the week versus at the end of the week. Because if you're open to adapting according to these energies, you have the potential to being much more wise and, kind of big picture, having a big picture approach to your drive, your ambition, even your self-image, things like that. Even sexuality, too. That's also kind of under Mars's domain. All of these things may be much wiser, big picture, and maybe kind of weirder by the end of the week, for a lack of a better word. Anyway, so I just thought that was really interesting. But Sunday, Mars trining Pluto. Mars is having this harmonious aspect with Pluto, which is a very dark energy. Yes, this is a trine. It's harmonious. It's very strong. But still, we have to take into account the players that are involved. Mars is a malefic. It's a warrior energy. Pluto is... what I find is that Pluto aspects usually channel in like insecurities and issues with, power struggles. They channels in issues that have to do with like our mortality, our weaknesses, and how we deal with those. The more we can be brave and like face our fears, that's kind of what Pluto is all about. So I think Mars trining Pluto, I could see us, I don't know, having like a lot of ambition or fighting for a greater like purpose today. Also kind of going back to what I was saying earlier, just channeling in like a much longer term consciousness into our goals and ambitions, etc. Kind of interesting to look at, but it will be overshadowed by the full moon, which I still have yet to talk about. Really briefly, let's talk about Mercury and Venus, because they both make aspects today too. Mercury, let's talk about Mercury first, because Mercury is making its own aspect that doesn't really have as much to do with these other aspects. You could argue that Mercury is making kind of an out of sign square to Mars, but we already have enough to talk about. Let's not get distracted. Mercury is squaring Uranus today. So this is really interesting. I personally love Mercury-Uranus aspects. Yes, this is a square, so it is contentious. It can be tense. But remember, squares are just a time for change, okay? And Mercury and Uranus, these are both energies very oriented toward change. Mercury has to do with our mentality, or the information we're coming across. It's the mental energy. It's our minds. And with Mercury making this aspect to Uranus, Uranus is the great awakener, right? So Mercury-Uranus aspects, even squares like this one, can be great for coming up with, epiphanies, a sudden idea, a shift in consciousness, a new perspective, etc. Especially because this is it's a waxing square. I know all these aspects are waxing, but it's true. This is a waxing square. So this means that Mercury is still... it's like a youthful energy. It's the first square that Mercury has made to Uranus since it conjoined Uranus back in May. Okay. So anyways, this is a very active energy. It's really supporting sudden new ideas. And this is even more true because we have the full moon today as well. So that's where, even though these two aspects they're happening independent from one another, they're not like aspecting one another, if that makes sense in astrology. However, they do have similar kind of meanings. Their themes overlap a little bit when it comes to, this is already pointing to huge awakenings, sudden shifts in perspective today, new ideas, new dreams, new inspiration, etc. Okay, now that Mercury's out of the way, let's talk about Venus. Venus is sextiling Jupiter today. This is channeling some really abundant energy. This is really positive stuff. I'm really excited about this because Venus and Jupiter are the benefics. These are the two easiest energies to work with in astrology. They both bring abundance and joy and pleasure. They both generally make life easy. Do they have downsides? Yes, but it's few and far between. Venus and Jupiter are both... they literally shine very brightly in the sky. If you ever look up at Venus and Jupiter, they're two of the brightest quote-unquote stars in the sky. So those being in alignment shows I don't know, good vibes for today. I think that's really great, considering we have so many other aspects today. Venus and Jupiter are just showing that they're getting along, they're supporting pleasure and abundance. Venus is particularly strong in Leo, I think. It's really showing that we're desiring our own self-expression. Let's have fun, let's keep things light, let's keep things sunshiny. That's what Venus and Leo is all about. Jupiter is technically in detriment in Gemini, but it's showing abundance as well in its own way. So that's kind of just a side note. Again, Venus sextiling Jupiter it's not aspecting the Mercury Uranus aspect or the full moon or anything like that. It's happening independently, but all of this is kind of coinciding. That's what's so wild about it. All right, lastly, I won't make you wait any longer. Let's talk about the full moon. So this full moon, as if it weren't enough, we already have more than enough other things going on in the background, but this full moon itself is very interesting as well, because like I said in the intro, this happens where moon is opposing the sun. That's what a full moon is. But what's interesting, let me pull the chart up a little bit so we can see the moon a little better, since it's at the bottom of the chart here. But sun is at the last degree of Cancer, and it's being opposed by the moon at the last degree of Capricorn. I know technically this chart is for noon Eastern Standard Time, Sunday, July 21st, and by this time the moon has already reached 2 degrees Aquarius. But if you can just imagine, a few hours before that, moon will be at 29 degrees Capricorn. That's where it's that peak full moon energy, and it's opposing the sun. Okay, so full moon, and this is kind of it makes me think of a blue moon, even though technically a blue moon is where you have 2 full moons in the same month. It just reminds me of that because this is the second Capricorn full moon we've had this year, which is really rare. Usually you'll have one full moon in one sign, and then the full moon will be in the next sign the next month, the next astrological month, if that makes sense. So in other words, usually there's one full moon while sun is in Cancer, and then one full moon while sun is in Leo, etc. But every now and then you get 2. So we already had a Capricorn full moon 4 weeks ago, but now we get a second Capricorn full moon. Hopefully that makes sense. So kind of rare, kind of funky. I just feel like I'm repeating myself because I just talked about a lot of this for that Capricorn full moon back then. But anyway, so what's interesting about a Capricorn full moon is a couple things. For one, the moon is in detriment in Capricorn, so we may feel kind of out of place. It's weird, it's funky, it's quirky. This is a great energy for thinking outside the box. It's great energy for reevaluating our goals as well, since Capricorn is all about goals and the long-term focus. But also what's interesting about this full moon is that sun is in Cancer, which is ruled by the moon. So this is it's a weird one. On the one hand, moon is ruling the sun, so it's kind of strong in that regard. But then again, moon is in detriment though. So it's I don't know. It's sun is in the moon's house, but then moon is off in some random other place. It's kind of dysfunctional, and very, very emotional. But at the same time, we may feel a little bit. We may kind of block our emotions with the Capricorn full moon. Really, there's all kinds of different things that can be happening because moon it's not a malefic or a benefic. Moon is kind of a neutral energy. I always say moon has to do with emotion, and emotion itself is neither positive nor negative. It's kind of both and everything in between. So that's kind of what can happen today. On the one hand, moon being in detriment would show that we are disconcerted. Something's out of place. We feel awkward. But at the same time, that's all the more reason to think outside the box. We may come up with I said earlier, we may come up with new ideas, new perspectives. I think this could be a part of that, especially with our goals. But also the one aspect that, technically sun is making kind of 3 aspects today. Moon is opposing the sun. The full moon itself is conjunct Pluto as well. And also sun is trining Neptune. So it's a lot to talk about. Because remember, anytime a planet, including the sun, reaches the last degree, it aspects Neptune. So on the one hand, sun is trining Neptune, channeling in this spiritual energy, very ethereal, tuning into the collective consciousness and things like that. But also, we've got the full moon itself, which is conjoining Pluto, channeling in these really intense dark energies as well. So I mean, I've been just rattling on about Sunday, July 21st for, I feel like it's been like 10 minutes already. Because the complicated thing is you have to take into account that everything I just said is true for Sunday, like at the same time. It's all of it happening at once. So you've got the good vibes with Venus sextiling Jupiter. You've got this intensity with the full moon conjunct Pluto. You've got spiritual vibes, the sun, trining Neptune. You've got the new ideas and awakening with Mercury squaring Uranus, and probably some other things that I forgot because it's just a lot. So in short, it's going to be a wild day. Let's just put it that way. A lot's happening. Depending on your specific chart, you probably have one or more placements that's lining up with one or more of these aspects. So depending on what's lining up where for you, one of these aspects, one of these dynamics that I just talked about may hit you harder. Like, let's say you have some major placements at 12 degrees Gemini or Leo. Well, then this is going to be a super great day for you. Kudos to you. You're going to have like a really happy, expansive day today. But let's say you've got major placements at the end of Capricorn. This is going to be a culmination for you, a turning point in your life. It may be very intense for you because of Pluto being close to your placement. Do you know what I mean? Like, it really, really depends on what your placements are. But generally speaking, this is going to be a crazy day for all of us. It really is. I don't say that negatively necessarily. It's just kind of everything. It's all over the place. I wouldn't really view it as negative or positive. I would say just roll with the punches. There's nothing we can do about it. Let's embrace this and see how we can adapt to it, because it does look like things can change in a very large way on Sunday. And remember too, that's the last day of Cancer. So it's like we have this huge bang of like all these different energies that have been waiting to happen. And then, and then the sun is like, see ya, Cancer, we're done with that, and then now sun is at 0 degrees Leo by the time we get to Monday. But we're going to have to wait to talk about that until next week's forecast. So next week we've got sun entering Leo, Mercury entering Virgo, so 2 domicile energies. That'll be really sweet to talk about. And then Chiron turns retrograde, and we've got a third quarter moon. So lots to talk about. But I hope you have a great week. Thank you for hanging out with me, and I'll see you next week.